Crossing the immigrant trail was a difficult and dangerous endeavor, and no group of people better illustrate that than the Mormon Handcarters. Theirs is one of the most tragic stories in Wyoming's history. The Mormon Church was growing by leaps and bounds in the 1830s and 40s, and not just in the United States. Mormon converts could also be found in many northern European countries. For European Mormons who wanted to move to Deseret, the name they used for the new Mormon homeland in Utah Territory, Brigham Young and the Apostles tried to find ways to ease the expenses of the trip.
The trek to America to start a new life was a pretty difficult one and very expensive. Think about what a European had to do, a European family. They had to purchase a ticket for their entire family, plus all their belongings that they could possibly afford to take, to go across the Atlantic Ocean. Once they get to Boston or New York, they've got to buy train tickets for everybody and train tickets for all their luggage. Eventually, they reach Iowa City, Missouri. That's where the rails ended and the trail began. And that's where it got even more expensive, because now they've got to buy a prairie schooner, and they've got to buy beasts of burden, and they've got to buy all the supplies they're going to need for a 3-month trip. Well, a lot of them could not afford that. So the Mormon Church tried to set up a system that made them not have to buy that last bit. Instead, they would use what essentially amounted to a giant wheelbarrow. They would hand cart their stuff all the way across the prairie to Utah.
The handcarts were even smaller than would first appear. The church required immigrants to carry a lot of supplies that were already needed in Utah, so there wasn't much room for personal belongings. In fact, each immigrant was allowed only 17 pounds of clothing and personal effects.
On August 17th, 1856, the Willie Company sets out from Iowa City, Missouri. Now that's pretty late, but that's not as late as the Martin Company. They set out on August 27th. They've got a 3-month journey ahead of them to cross the prairie, and they have to make it.
Setting out on the immigrant trail was a bit like setting out on an ocean crossing. There might be a few islands you could survive on in the route, like Fort Kearny or Fort Laramie, but they were not places you wanted to stop for long. Once you cast off from Missouri, you needed to go all the way to Salt Lake City, a distance of 1,300 miles, to be safe through the winter. It was a warm, dry fall, which meant limited water was available along the trail. Soon, many of the handcarters were sick with dysentery and cholera from the stagnant pools that had been drawn from all summer. Running late and then slowed by even more illness, Captain Martin ordered everyone to lighten their load in personal effects. It being hot on the prairie, many dropped their heavy coats.
On October 18th, the wind switched from out of the southwest to out of the northwest. And on October 19th, it began to snow. These people are still having to pull these carts across the prairie, but now they're pulling them through snow. They're still having to wade through the streams while they pull the carts, but now their clothing's beginning to freeze. The Willie Company was 75 miles ahead. They were at South Pass as the storm began to intensify. They found a place to hunker down and stayed there. The Martin Company settled in this valley out here behind me. The wind was blowing so hard they couldn't put the tents up.
At this point in time, hundreds of thousands of people had already passed on the immigrant trail, and all potential firewood had been burned. There wasn't even grass, as the passing livestock had eaten everything.
The snow was falling, and their clothing was beginning to freeze to their skin. While they waited for the storm to pass, they began to die.
A fast-moving group of Mormon militia on horses had passed the handcarters just before the storm, and they reported the slow-moving companies to Brigham Young. He then sent out a rescue team to find the freezing pioneers.
The rescue group managed to find both companies and did get them to Salt Lake by early November. However, the weather took its toll. The Willie Company on South Pass lost 67 people, and the Martin Company, right back here in what we now call Martin's Cove, lost 145 people to the cold.
Yeah.